Well, I am of the theater because I don't say unfortunately, okay? I am a woman of the theater.
Saludos! Welcome to this very special episode of Spotlight, in which we will share highlights of the inspiring story of Puerto Rican Traveling Theater and its founder, the legendary Miriam Colón. As many of you know, Pregones Theater, based in the Bronx, and Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, based in the Broadway district in Manhattan, collaborated for years until we finally became one, building a brand new future together and securing the legacy of our dear friend and theater and film icon, the late Miriam Colón. On behalf of Pregones and Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, we hope you enjoy this episode of Spotlight.
What I have known and what I had dreamt of for, I think, since I have memory of what I wanted to do and what was engaged. It's been the theater, and it was a total accident. Introduced in school, in a little play, presented in junior high, going to auditions with the other girls without knowing who was the director or anybody, and getting the role was a surprise and a very nervous proposition. So that it's been a long road, but I did not have a plan, and I did not have powerful parents or a powerful family whose connections would get me to auditions and this and that. I learned from my friends, and I learned from my teachers. My teachers have been my best friends.
The first time I met Miriam Colón was at the Association of Hispanic Arts. It was a fabulous service organization for Latino artists, and in the 70s and in the 80s. And everyone knew about Miriam. I believe it was around 1977. She was about to open the new venue on 47th Street. And we put together a meeting of the artistic directors of Latino theaters at the moment to talk about a project, a common project. And here comes Miriam, and it was, I was so in awe and a bit starstruck, but I still had to do my work and follow her around and with questions. And I was just glued to her because of the role she played at the time and kept playing throughout.
In our presence in New York, we became aware that Pregones was interested in a lot of the poets and a lot of the dramatists and a lot of the literature of Puerto Rico and Spain and Cuba, Santo Domingo, Venezuela, Colombia. And we said, yes, there's so much similarity. And that sort of attracted each one of us to the other, the similarity of the purpose and the desire to share. The greatest thing that we have to share is our culture. We would like to make them aware of the richness of ours, and we would like to share with our youth the richness that is not taught to them in the public school system. I think that obligation belongs to the leadership, and that we cannot depend on somebody else inventing or putting it together for us. I think it is a moral obligation.
In the 1950s, while studying theater in New York, Puerto Rican-born Miriam Colón was drawn to Hollywood, becoming one of the few working Latina actors at the time.
I wanted to be an actress in the United States. I went to Hollywood to live because I was getting a lot of calls to go there to work. And at that time, there was not that many Latina girls in Hollywood, so I was queen. I was very busy.
Chico, you remember me?
Sure do. How you been, Red?
Muy bien. How are you?
I'm all right.
I lived about 6 or 7 years, and after a while, I got bored. I got restless. I was not dragged off my feet by the idea that I had to be a movie star, and I wanted to be able to audition for the theater and to do a play. I just needed to be home.
In 1967, Miriam Colón returned to New York and founded the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater.
The traveling theater started out in the street, bringing theater to Latino communities and bringing the Puerto Rican experience to the broader New York area. They would go into the neighborhoods and they would just start performing on flatbed trucks. So this theater for the people, it was a whole new approach, not theater for the elite.
Yo también sé hablar en jerga.
¡Ay, qué caballero es!
¡Manos quietas!
¡Diantre! Tiene más de animal que de caballero.
The Puerto Rican Traveling Theater has been the guiding force, or the ones that have opened the grounds for, I think, almost every single Latino artist that continues to do work, especially here in New York City.
I had always been in love with the play La Carreta, the ox cart.
Miriam Colón and Raúl Juliá and Lucy Boscana had the courage to take La Carreta out into the streets. A play that narrates the transition from the countryside in Puerto Rico to here in the United States. And then you're there looking at this and you're going, wow, I am this. And there's something in here that is going to allow me to move forward.
And I noticed that it touched everybody. You didn't have to be a Puerto Rican. And I kept thinking, isn't it amazing? A play that says so much about us and about the struggle of people. I realized that I wanted to continue doing it, and we started planning for, as soon as the play closed, to take it to the streets. And I was enamored and forever enamored of the idea of going to the people with live theater. To this day, look where I am, doing the same thing.
It was interesting to see how the arts collaborated in a way, or shared a development of an identity of a people that have migrated to this country, that had come here to work in factories, in the fields, who had decided to stay here and who were beginning to question, who am I in this new setup? Am I gonna go back? Is my community gonna be established here? My children are being born here. What does that mean? Theater that the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater was providing to these communities allowed that kind of a dialogue to take place.
Ajustaremos cuentas. Dama que hace espada.
I met Miriam in the beginning of the 70s when a theater troupe that I was part of came to perform for the Traveling Theater. And then later, in the late 70s, I was working as the director of the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater's training unit. So that's how I came into contact with the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater.
The first time I met Miriam was at the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater on 47th Street, where she greeted me with a certain level of formality. The second time I met Miriam, however, was at La Fiesta Puertorriqueña in Central Park. It was the culminating performance of the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater summer tour. And she was surrounded by people, and it was like a cloud of love. And it was a beautiful contrast between sort of representative of the theater that I first met and this public figure that was adored and that really glowed because of that love and gave it back.
It was an incredible experience because Miriam is such a generous woman, and she's a very forceful actor. So that really impressed me. And I was working with Pablo Cabrera, who later, and I believe, well, he was also working with Miriam at the training unit. So it was a beautiful experience, really, to get to know her.
Being bilingual has its problems. Sometimes I start a letter in Spanish and I finish it in English. And poor Alexandra Minchala, that works with me, is just, I never know if the letter is going to end there in Spanish or in English.
La primera vez que conocí a la señora Colón fue porque ella había pedido a la escuela una persona para que que hable español, que escriba en español, para pasar libretos.
Alexandra Minchala is was the ultimate friend to Miriam, her right hand till the very end. She spent over 30 years at the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, and she is that person who's observing history unfold right next to Miriam. And when we consolidated our two theaters, we were just hoping she would want to continue to be a part of it. So we're so happy that Alexandra continues to work, and she's right here with us. And Alex is just that person that Miriam trusted. And I remember often her saying to me, you know, I have this project and we're doing all this, and I need to talk to Alexandra about it. So she was that confident, that one person that Miriam trusted completely.
A través de los años, mi trabajo con la señora Colón y con el teatro consistía, pues, como dije antes, de pasar a libretos en español, en maquinillas, que entonces no había las computadoras, pero los hacía bien. Y después de un tiempo pasé al departamento de contabilidad porque la persona que estaba encargada de ese departamento fue de vacaciones. Y el administrador me preguntó si yo podía hacer esto de contabilidad. Le dije, perfecto. Entonces se sorprendió porque yo sabía de contabilidad. Entonces, de ahí en adelante me quedé en ese departamento.
Miriam invited me to work with her at the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater in the development desk. And we were, I think, at a point in a transition for the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater where she was looking to see if we could devise new ways of making the work at the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater more sustainable. The work that we engaged in for several years was about assessing where the artistic programs were. It was about her sitting down to tell me how she understood the philosophy behind the main stage, the philosophy behind the education program, the Raul Julia training unit, the playwrights unit, and for us to find ways to thread that back into a case for support, you know, a case for making sure that this legacy would continue.
Siempre ha sido una labor llena de emoción y de sorpresas hacer teatro, pero yo creo que como mujer de teatro, sí parte de mi energía debería de estar dedicada a promover obras, aunque yo no conozca a los autores, y de seguir promoviendo la posibilidad de que, además de saber la historia de tantos dramas que existen en el mundo del teatro actual, que haya sobre la realidad que tienen los puertorriqueños, los latinos, también tratando de encontrar su lugar en este ambiente.
This was the first place I worked when I moved to New York City as a young artist. It's one of the only places in New York where I can explore my artistic side and my culture.
We are so proud to be recognized as one of the leading Latinx theater ensembles in the nation. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being part of our family.
What I admired most about Miriam could not possibly be summarized in one sentence, or even briefly, but I will say that her tenacity. Miriam kept her fears to herself. She was just out there. She was courageous. She was a visionary. And it was amazing how someone who had grown to be such an important artist in Hollywood and, you know, movie making at the time and theater was so grounded in her community, in the concept of why she was building this theater in the middle of the city, in Midtown. And so I just admire her vision and her commitment to excellence and how she knew she was doing something that was going to be a turning point for Latino theater in New York City.
What I admire the most about Miriam Colón was and remains the capacity to always have the art at the center, the craft, the theater, the acting. These are things that were always the light ahead, and she was fearless about moving in that direction. And she was able to really lift other people into wanting to do that. And for people who were aspiring artists, practicing artists, regardless of their stage in their career, she was that light too. And that's something that is forever.
From the very beginning of my getting acquainted with Pregones, I saw a similarity in terms of an emphasis on Puerto Rican culture, an emphasis on our Spanish Latino heritage, a love for our poets and dramatists, a love for our painters, so many manifestations of our culture. So the love and the similarities were there from the very beginning.
Lo que más le apasionaba a ella era el training unit, porque era una escuela para jóvenes hispanos sobre todo, que no podían pagar una escuela en otras academias.
Being present when artists were developing work. She loved to listen to a play in development. She loved to sit there silently taking it in and then have the opportunity to give feedback. And that feedback came from the heart.
Y también lo otro era el summer tour. Le encantaba llevar el teatro a las calles, ahí iba ella también. Y decía que no le importaba que los niños corran delante del escenario o que interrumpan la obra, porque ese era su objetivo, llevársela para ellos.
Miriam also loved opening night. It was the outcome of something that had been brewing for a long time. So much work goes behind it, and I think she was very conscious that not everybody knows all the work that goes into it. So come opening night, she was just happy, and it was an important thing. So she was celebratory of everybody around her, and it was a special day every time.
Miriam loved to see new talent grow, and she was totally committed to emerging artists, emerging playwrights, as well as, of course, promoting the work of the very established ones.
This theater is the realization of a dream. We looked and we found, but we rodamos mucho prior to finding it, and we have to be grateful to schools and to churches and to people who allowed us to rehearse or allow us to have our boxes, etc. At the beginning, the boxes were all under my bed, but then after a while, my husband said, no, you have to take that out. You have to take all that out. And I found spaces. But the realization of this as a dream, I say, is not finished. You see, we have been able to find this plant. It's a property. It's not ours. We don't own this theater. What we own is the body of work that has been brought to it. It's the creations of writers, of the creations of directors, of dramatists, of composers, that using this as the outside shelter, have used it to project their message. And I had to start from scratch. You know, they call doing the rounds. And I said, what is that, doing the rounds? What does it mean? They would ask me, well, are you doing the rounds? You said, well, mean going around. That's exactly what it means. You go around and around, and you see the agents, and you see the producers, and you see the casting directors. And when I started, it was nothing wrong with you going to see a producer, knocking on their door, and they say, my name is so-and-so, and I am a Puerto Rican actress, and I have trained here and here, and here is my resume and my pictures. There's a little bit about my background, about some of the teachers I've had, and also some of the plays that I have interpreted. So you more or less submit some references about your career, about your training, etc. And that's what making the rounds is.
Especially towards her later years, Miriam would get invited to work on independent film projects, typically run by younger talent outside of the Hollywood machine. And she really loved that. She already knew the craft, and she was, in a sense, rediscovering it through the lens of people who were not following all of the rules. And she would always come back, with anecdotes and laughter and a great deal of appreciation for that opportunity.
I just loved being with Miriam as much as I did. I was very fortunate. We became very close over the years, sort of my big sister, mother figure, mentor, and she listened to me, and I listened to her. I learned a lot from her. We loved those late night glasses of wine after a full day of work. We would just, wander over the theater and go and sit down and have some wine and chat about everything. It was a very special friendship, and I will never ever forget it or forget her. So I am really a lucky person because I had Miriam in my life.
The role of a theater is not just getting the house. It's also supposed to be the cultivation of those creators, of those playwrights that are going to observe the situation of the Latinos right here in this country and in many parts of the world, and develop the ability to create a drama that can touch your heart or can touch your conscience. That's a big challenge, and we are still in that path. I have helped with putting more than half of my life in this endeavor, and I'm still on my way. When I die, I cannot take this theater with me. It doesn't belong to me. Only the work that was created, only the work that we nurtured, only the work that we helped others to put across, and that's very valid, because we have to find a place, and we have to find opportunities to express our interpretation of what is happening in our own words, not in the words of somebody that spent 10 days in Puerto Rico at the Caribe Hilton, and then they say that they know Puerto Rico, or that they can write about the reality of Puerto Rico. You have to live with the people. You have to study how they came to be. You have to study and understand the struggles that they have now. And when that is expressed so that we can all understand it, then I think the theater achieves its highest purpose.
La señora Colón fue a Washington a recibir la medalla de parte del presidente Obama, Medalla Nacional de las Artes. Pero ella fue también con dos de sus pilares, que fue su esposo Freddy Valle y Rosalba. Fue acompañada de ellos. Así que cuando ella regresó, nos estaba haciendo toda la historia, cómo entró, cómo se sentó, cómo ella tenía que mirar al señor Obama así, porque él tan alto y ella tan pequeñita. Entonces nos abrió la caja, esa medalla hermosa, una medalla tan grande que cuando ella se la puso en el cuello, era indescriptible lo que se veía. Era muy linda. Ella decía que se sintió muy contenta, con mucha emoción, y que dijo que le dio ganas de llorar. Pero llegó un momento mágico que fue cuando el presidente, el Mr. Obama, le dio un beso en la mejilla. Allí se arregló todo.
She was always thinking about the message. What did it mean to have a beautiful theater on 47th Street in Midtown Manhattan? And I believe that her legacy, we're still living it.
Miriam's legacy is enormous. Miriam's legacy means different things to different people, but few would disagree that it is monumental. She worked to create a body of work that continues to circulate that work she did on film. And she also lifted up an institution that remains. And I think that respect and love for that institution is also tied to her. So you know, today when you go to the PRTT and you visit the exposition of some of her awards, sort of a permanent space where people can come back to that reckoning of the titanic labor of lifting a theater when she did. That's part of the legacy, and it's also the seed that is in the people that continue to do theater as Latinx people. I'm certain that many share that feeling.
Entonces tú vas rodando. Si es un teatro rodante que rueda. Pues sí, nosotros hemos rodado bastante y gracias a Dios en el camino nos hemos encontrado tantos amigos, tantos ayudantes, tanta gente que entienden la importancia que el teatro tiene en la educación de un pueblo, en tu apreciación de la vida, de la naturaleza, de tu aprender históricamente por qué el teatro es importante y qué te revela el teatro. A veces una obra de teatro te puede dar una lección que te cogió 30 años sin tú entender. Y viste una obra de teatro, una escena dramatizada que a veces puede tener la esencia del problema que tú has enfrentado y tú miras las alternativas que hay y la ves dramatizada y aprendes en una noche, en 6 minutos, en 10 minutos, lo que no aprendiste en toda una vida.